The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.
It's 11 o'clock straight up right here, 11 o'clock Central Time. That means it's time for the UAB Director's Chair. He is the UAB Athletic Director, Mark Ingram. And when we record the show here on August 17th, we are 2 weeks away, baby. How you feeling, Mark? You ready for some North Carolina A&T?
Man, I'm excellent, Tony. Thank you. Go Blazers.
I mean, I cannot believe we're sniffing it. And, you know, it's funny because it just cooled off here a couple of days ago. It's been in the 60s in the morning, and I know whenever college football is right around the corner, it starts cooling off. So, man, I'm ready for the big, fat spiders to start coming out. I'm ready for some leaves to fall, and I'm ready for some footballs in the air. So we're going to talk about some UAB football coming up in a few minutes, and a lot of accolades, by the way, for this particular team as they join the AAC for the first time. So we're super excited about that. I did want to get into a couple of other stories, though, including this story out of Buff's camp, Colorado. Evidently, there was a fight. A couple players got into it, and some of the players decided they didn't want to be part of that fight. They walked away, and Deion Sanders went off. He said, and I quote here, "I've seen two of you walking over there. You got a teammate fighting. Why'd you do that? Where'd you go? If one fights, we all fight. You understand that? I don't want to see you walking off when someone else is fighting. Never again. If one fights, we all fight." Can you kind of give your average college football fan an understanding of how often this happens in camp? I know you're tired of hitting each other and you're ready to hit someone else, but how often does this happen in camps?
Oh, well, how often does it happen in camps? I mean, every day, probably somebody gets into a little scuffle. You know, what that turns into is usually, you know, I've got my helmet on and so do you. So you punch me in my face mask, which is jarring, but it's not the same as if you just punched me in my jaw. Mm-hmm. You know, and then I grab you or you grab me and we wrestle around and it's exhausting. You know, I never did it because I was too, you know, fat, lazy, tired, whatever I was. You know, I was like, I'm not spending my energy on that. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure I got into one or three in my career, but it just, you know, that's why I stayed out of it. And again, until my helmet comes off, there's just not really anything that you know we're going to do to each other in terms of real harm. And I'm not saying that anybody would advocate. And I heard about, my son actually told me about this story with Colorado. So, but other than what he said and what you've now said in your question is the extent of my knowledge. I mean, I think that, like, I don't want to speak for Coach Sanders, so that's not what I'm doing here. But I think that coaches do want some element of intensity, right? You're talking about, you know, camaraderie, team. We're together. Now, is that the right way? You know, I'm not judging him or getting into that. But I think that in terms of the spirit of a fight, many coaches will say, you know, an occasional fighting is not exactly bad. Meaning, at least they care. They care enough. All right, now we got effort. Yeah. Versus a really passive group that just kind of nonchalantly moves through the motions and through, you know, their practice drills. But I've heard of coaches before say the exact opposite. In fact, one of my son's coaches one time said to their team, "Hey, if Mark and Tony get into a fight, we're going to keep practicing and let them fight until they are tired of fighting." Yeah. And so is that right? I don't know. Both sides of this debate or discussion, you know, you could find some number of people who'd be ready to terminate the coach and everybody, you know, whom they report to for either of these things. And it's, I don't want to throw it in the boys will be boys, but you've got a sport, football, where every single play is like a little miniature boxing match. Mm-hmm. I'm punching you and you're punching me. And as humans, it's you get to a point where it's like, Tony, they said 50%. They said half speed. What are you doing? You know, and now you're making me look bad because you're going half speed, or I'm going half speed like they said, and you're going 90% speed and making me look like a goof. And so now I'm being fussed at. Well, I don't like that, you know, because if you went half speed and I went half speed, we'd be okay. And it usually is from that kind of thing is where this, you know, is born from. So Again, it's not usually anything that actually gets anybody truly injured. But I don't know that I've ever heard anybody say, if one fights, we all fight. I guess my only concern on that would be, now, how's that going to translate in a game? Because if we all do that in a game,
well,
we're not going to be able to finish the game.
And you're talking about, obviously, a first-year head coach trying to make his imprint on the program, so I get that. You're also talking about a team that was 1-11 last year. And I also understand that you're also talking about guys who are probably looking for playing time. He's already basically said, if one fights, we all fight. He must like fighters. And at this point in his career, it's probably a good thing. He got himself some fodder on ESPN, which is probably a good thing. The funny thing is twofold. First of all, it's amazing how often teams fight. Maybe it's just because there's more video, I guess, but you see teams fight before the season. Once the team starts, it looks like they're taking it out on the other team, which is good. The other thing is, I'm pleasantly surprised we don't see a hell of a lot more fighting in college basketball camps, because when we used to have a pickup game, you could go 30 or 40 seconds without being touched. In college hoops now, man, I mean, it is as physical as I've ever seen it. Would you not agree?
Well, again, I know basketball is physical in its own right, just like soccer is in its own right. The only difference is, and just like, lacrosse, or, think about things like wrestling, where it is a modified fight, and football is that. Every single play at practice, if we run 100 of them and I'm going against you and I are physically striking one another. And so that's just the only difference is, like if I just kind of tapped you in the arm, and then you tap me a little harder, and then I tap you a little harder, and then you tap me. Next thing you know, we're swinging, you know, and it's just, I think it's just from that, and just the nature of the sport. If it was boxing, and even though we're wearing headgear, the purpose is to punch one another, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's just hard to go from a place where you are boxing for sport and now boxing to fight. And it's the same thing in really all sports, but football, I just put in that category. And I think if football has more, it's also that I think the players also recognize that when they hit one another in the head, they're actually hitting each other in a helmet. Yeah. I might hurt my hand punching your helmet, right?
It's all fun and games till someone gets hurt.
Yeah. And I just, I think they also know that, if I were to punch you with a helmet on, you're going to know it now. Yeah. But you're not going home with a broken jaw.
No doubt. This is the UAB Director's Chair. He's the UAB Athletic Director, Mark Ingram. He joins us every single week right here on TKR, the TKR app. There's 3 letters, TKR, through Android or Apple. You can pull it up, listen to the show at least 5 days a week, 11 o'clock Central here on the Tony Curry Radio Network. And, of course, wherever you get your podcast, go back and listen to all of our previous episodes. They're fantastic. A lot of classic rock and roll, too, there. A lot of people are going, you guys are still doing rock and roll. We may drip it in just a little bit, but we got some classic rock to talk about. We certainly got a lot of college football to talk about as UAB gets ready to kick off their inaugural AAC campaign coming up 2 weeks from tonight. A couple of emails, info@TonyCurryRadio.net, info@TonyCurryRadio.net. From Paul Ensign, one of your biggest fans, a question for Mark. Mark, please give us an update on what you could share with us regarding the possibility of teams from the AAC joining the PAC, including UAB, or a flat-out merger AAC and PAC. Also, if we lose just 4 teams, what are the plans? Does the AAC poach teams? Does the AAC look at the merger with the remaining teams from the Mountain West, ...
Well, great question, Paul, and it's obviously a hot topic right now, right? I mean, it's an interesting, unique time, unusual, in fact, in our landscape. And I, just when I thought it couldn't get any weirder, right, with NIL and transfer rules and all that, here we go. We have not been contacted by anybody. So the fact that there's news out there beyond Twitter. I mean, I read an article that is a legitimate article by, I think, a legitimate news source. And if you read it, it acts like we may be putting on a different conference hat tomorrow. We've not been contacted by anybody, and I don't think that the others have either. I can't speak to that, but I don't believe that they have.
Let me ask you this before you go any further. What do you think is more likely to happen? The Pac-12 pick up more teams and remain intact, or the 4 teams that are actually in the conference dissolve? And again, we're not talking right now. We're talking after this year. The Pac-12 is still there, but we do have this Big 12 situation. I'm talking about the 12 teams making the playoffs next season. The Pac-12 is part of that right now. So what's more likely to happen? The Pac-12 stay intact or they dissolve?
Well, I mean, you're asking me for a total guess, and
Yes.
I can give you my opinion,
Yes.
and that's all it is. You got four great schools, and you've had a conference that's over 100 years old, but they're not in a great position right now. It would they're not operating from a position of strength, and they're four great schools, but there's only four of them, and it's just a really unfortunate situation for those four teams. Who I think right now are trying to examine all of their options and figure out what might be the best. And they may end up contacting some folks. And
from a fan standpoint, I'd love to see it stay intact. I mean, all you got to do is find four more, and I can't imagine some teams.
It's just who do you go get that has an assurance that they're going to be able to, like, if you asked me, I'd say, okay, well, we become five. You got to have at least eight. So who are the other three you're going to get? And how can you assure me of enough money to cover my travel expenses and also make more money than I'm currently slated to make in the American?
As an athletic director, does it bother you? I mean, I know you keep in touch with other athletic directors, certainly now in the AAC and in Conference USA when you were there, but does it bother you the fact that so many teams are being poached and it seems like it's surprising people? I mean, as an athletic director, would that bother you to all of a sudden find yourself in a conference with four teams?
Of course it would. Yeah. I mean, I think I read this from one of the current Pac-4 ADs that they woke up on a Friday morning believing that the work to be done that day was to everyone in the Pac-12 to discuss the offer that had been made to them by Apple and negotiate that, and either negotiate or accept or whatever that looked like, and keep going. And by the end of the day, they lost Washington and Oregon, and by the end of the next day, they had lost Utah, Arizona, and Arizona State. So they went from thinking they were going to discuss and examine this television package through Apple to, oh my goodness, what's happening and what does that mean for us?
Yeah.
I mean, it was a startling weekend for those ADs and presidents who are still reeling from it, and still trying to figure out. I mean, it's just a wild time, and it kind of is because every conference does their own media rights instead of the NCAA doing the media rights for everybody. If the NCAA did that and everybody got the same thing, well, then you would maintain all these regional rivalries and regional matchups. You could still make more money than your school could make more money than my school by fundraising, ticket sales, and that kind of thing. Which is basically the NFL model, which is why the NFL is so popular coast to coast. Now you're only dealing with, 32 teams, not 132 teams. But that's why, everybody's trying to stay relevant, stay in the top, and not just be relevant. Relevant is, yes, of course, that's like the minimum goal, right? But you're not trying to just be relevant. You're trying to be championship competitive, and you just can't do that when you're completely out-resourced by everybody else. And I guess for the ones that decided to leave, I can only assume they felt like it would be short-term painful, but long-term better for them. And everybody's got to do what they think is best for them, I guess.
He is Mark Ingram, the UAB athletic director, joined us every single week. We're very grateful to have him, of course, for the UAB director's chair. I got one more email, info@tonycurryradio.net. I just found Bill in Southside wants to know, having Trent Dilfer as your head coach at UAB, how does that help UAB's exposure as a former ESPN commentator? He said, can the coach ever call in some favors to get some extra TV time for his Blazers?
Well, a great question, Bill, and the answer is yes, and has.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been on, Colin Cowherd and all these other national shows many times, and absolutely is getting more attention for us, and we're being talked about on a broader scale than ever before, and it's a combination of a lot of things, but Coach Trent Dilfer is a big part of that equation for sure. But it's layering all these things, right? We built a great practice facility. We built this fantastic football stadium. Now we're going into a new conference, the American, that it by itself is giving us more exposure. And now you hire a famous person in Trent Dilfer, who was a Pro Bowl quarterback, Super Bowl winning quarterback, 9-year career with ESPN, the flagship, worldwide leader in sports, the Elite 11, just all those things combined yeah, he's a popular figure, and then he does a great job with the media. That's the other thing that to his credit, they love talking to him because he's very open, he's very direct, he's very frank. But he's also, he's high energy, and he's just a great interview, right?
Yeah.
And
No, he's
and
good.
you've done this forever, and he's a great interview. So who they enjoy talking to, and I think he genuinely enjoys talking to them. I think he, from his time in media, understands their job. And maybe respects and appreciates their job more than a traditional coach who hasn't done that. I think a lot of times because, part of the media's job is it's not always wine and roses, right? So they're going to occasionally write critical things, and in doing that, you can get offended. You're a human being.
Yeah.
People go, "Oh, he makes a bunch of money. He's the coach." That's part of the job. Yes, it is, but he's still a person, who you're criticizing. That person gets up and goes to work every day with a bunch of other people who get up and go to work every day to try to do a good job. Nobody's going in saying, "Ooh, it'd be awesome if we could finish 12th. That'd be good."
Yeah.
Nobody's trying to do that.
Well,
so it's
yeah.
a lot wrapped up in it, So it's easy to get offended, but I think Trent's time in the media, he's still a person and still could get offended. But I think he also, just from a different viewpoint, different lens, understands and appreciates that work too.
Probably not a fair question, but I'm going to give you a chance to toot your own horn at UAB. But with Trent Dilfer and with Andy Kennedy and what he's done with the basketball program, would you say as an athletic director, this is the finest staff you have from top to bottom in all sports at UAB Athletics?
Well, we got a bunch of great people. Yeah, we've got a bunch of great administrators too, and a bunch of great people in our marketing department, our development staff, our media relations team, our creative content, our trainers, our strength coaches, academics, top to bottom, you name any group, and we got a lot of good people, and we got a lot of great coaches, and have had great coaches. I mean, I've got a pretty lengthy list of people that we've hired in our head coaching jobs that are not here anymore because they moved on to higher profile, higher paying jobs because they did well here, and I'm happy for them. You always hate to lose somebody that's really good, but if they're really good, that you did a good job in identifying that talent, and you provided them the resources to be successful. They were successful. Somebody else identified that success and said, "We're willing to pay more than you can to get it."
Yeah.
And so they did. And I don't begrudge anybody for improving their situation for their family and themselves. And if they left us better than we were when they got here, then we are also better. And it also puts us in a position to go get yet another great coach as a replacement. So, I think about AJ Doherty, who's our softball coach, who in his first year last year was the Conference USA Coach of the Year.
Mm-hmm.
He replaced Joe Guthrie, who's now at Texas A&M, who replaced Jimmy Kalidas, who's at Arizona State.
Yeah,
that's back-to-back coaches who've come in here, done a nice job, and been sought after by others. And I have no doubt that in a few years somebody's going to try to come get AJ, and he's awesome.
Yeah, there's no doubt.
Erica Demers was our soccer coach. She came in here and was here for I think 6 years and did a terrific job, and now she's at Cincinnati, who, remember, is now in the Big 12.
Mm-hmm.
So Marin Lavery's now at Northwestern. I mean, I could go on and on with coaches that have come here, done well, and are now at great places. Mike Wilson, our golf coach at Wisconsin. So,
and that's why I asked the question.
Yeah, thrilled for them, but it comes back to a big picture, which is our president, Dr. Watts, sets a tone for being excellent, and you can drive around our campus and see. Again, I'm in my 9th year here, which feels like a longer time, maybe, or some people go, "Wow, has it been 9 years?" And it has gone fast. But look at the 3 brand new dormitories and the brand new student center and the nursing school, business school. There's an engineering building with a ribbon cutting today.
Yeah.
And another one we just broke ground on, and a Panhellenic building for Greek life and student organizations, and a College of Arts and Sciences building. I mean, there's layers and layers and layers of things that are brand new popping up every day that are, of course, yes, they're institutional and for the university. That's all good for athletics too.
Yeah,
we've built or renovated 22 facilities for athletics, but they're in that as well, and it all works together, and those things all help these coaches to be successful and for our department to be successful. And Andy Kennedy, who's followed the program for a long time, obviously, he has said he thinks this is the best time in UAB athletics, and he's more qualified to say that than I am. But I appreciate it, and I agree with it, and I love having him and everybody else. So
good stuff.
It's an exciting time, man, to be a part of
UAB. Yeah, absolutely. UAB Director's Chair. He is Mark Ingram, the UAB Athletic Director. This is the Director's Chair. You can hear it every single week right here, at least 5 days a week, 11 o'clock Central Time here on the TKR app. And, of course, wherever you get your favorite podcasts, we're available anywhere and everywhere you get your podcast. All right, so Fish McWilliams up for the Bednarik, Jermaine Brown up for the Doak and the Hornig. You got Brady Wilson up for the Remington. You got some players who were getting some names, some pretty nice list. And despite that, UAB not picked to perform pretty well in their first year at the AAC. And I would expect that. And I know the coaching staff is loving that because you always want to look up. But now 2 weeks until you play your first game. What is it like going into this season? First of all, because you've changed conferences, and second of all, you really don't know what to expect. I mean, you've told me that Trent wants to flip the ball on the football field, wants to score a lot of points. That's easier said than done. But what's it like going into this first game in a couple of weeks, knowing that there's not a lot of expectations of this program outside what you would normally expect from a UAB football team?
Yeah, our expectations are high. I mean, what the media says, and I'm not saying that they're unqualified, but they're not at practice every day. And based on the fact that you've got an entirely new staff, you have a new system, offense and defense, you got 45 new players, you have a new conference, and you also have 3 road games against 3 opponents who all won their conference championship last year.
Yeah.
Georgia, back-to-back SEC and national champions, Tulane, who won the American and won the Cotton Bowl, beating Southern Cal, and then San Antonio, who's back-to-back Conference USA champions. And these are all on the road. So I'd say that assessment by them is not, without merit.
Yeah.
But like anything, you never know what you have until you're on the field and you can really see, okay, here's how much better or not we are. Here's how much than the people we haven't played. We'd like to think we have a feel for Florida Atlantic, though they have a new coach and a new staff, and I don't know how many new players, but, new players. So they're going through that as well. But we haven't played South Florida, so who also has a new coach and a new staff. And so some of these things vary, but because based on personnel changes. But we haven't played Navy, and I know Navy's tough because of the scheme that they run, but we don't know how we'll do against that. We don't know how we'll do against Temple, who've all been recruiting into the American with probably a higher profile, not necessarily more talented, but higher profile recruit. So it'll be interesting to see how we stack up, and the 45 new players who have a different look and feel as well. So I'm excited about it. And that's not to say that I think we're not going to be good. It's all just to say that part of the excitement around it is, looking forward to what is it and what will it look like. And I think that our coaches will show different looks frequently on both sides of the ball to try to mix things up and keep everybody off balance. But our opponents will do the same. So it'll be fun. Yeah,
it's going to be unbelievable. So I know a lot of people are excited, and it feels. I feel like as a fan, and I'm a huge fan, that we're kind of playing with house money here, and that we can throw pretty much everything we got at the kitchen sink as well into the season to see what we really have, and it feels like all the pieces are in place. I would just ask people, that we say this with every organization, particularly when you've got a brand new coach and a new staff, and you've lost as many players as you have. Just be patient, and you might be pleasantly surprised by what you see. And it's going to be great. Of course, that first game against North Carolina A&T going on down there, Protective. Get your tickets. UABsports.com is the website for all of it. I've got to ask you a classic rock question.
Put it on.
Yeah. So this Power Tripped Out live show, you know about the show?
No.
So I'm surprised you don't. We should go to the show. It's October 6th, 7th, and 8th at the Empire Polo Club out in Indio, California. It's where Coachella plays.
Okay.
It is $600. It is now listen to me here. It is Guns N' Roses Iron Maiden on Friday night. It is AC/DC Ozzy Osbourne on Saturday night, and it's Metallica and Tool on Sunday night. You pay for the ticket, you get into all 3 nights. I'm just saying. I'm trying to. There ain't a hotel within 1,000 miles of this place, so you'd be Woodstock and you'd be throwing your tent. But now we found out late last week that Ozzy Osbourne has bowed out, which is not a good sign because I think he's about ready to bow out in life. And Judas Priest is taking his place. I'm just saying, and I wanted to ask you the question: if we've seen Ozzy Osbourne play live for the last time in our lives, what does that mean to you?
I've seen Ozzy live.
I have too.
We talked about vocalists and we talked about our favorite frontmen. One of the things that I'm pretty sure we talked about, and if we didn't, I'm going to say it now. He has just such a unique. There's never a time where you would hear an Ozzy Osbourne song and not know who that is. Yep. That's what is to me so great. Now he's got all these great songs. He's been a great songwriter and he's written some really fantastic music through his career with Black Sabbath and then on his own as a solo artist. I love his sound. And I've been surprised that he's continued to play at all anywhere, which has got to be hard, but he's doing it because he loves it, right? I mean, it's just, it's in his DNA. It's been his whole life. And he probably keeps thinking, man, I could do another show. Well, it'd be fun. Let's do another show. And, he does another show and then he goes, man, this was tiring. Forgot how tiring this is, It's got to, I assume. And,
no, he's 74 years old, and he said that he thought he'd be ready for the show, and obviously to be on the same stage with, AC/DC and a band that hasn't played live in 7 years, it would take a lot for him to say he couldn't do it. He said, I just don't want to play half-aid. He said, I can't do it. I'm going to make sure that I give you the best. But at the age of 74, I don't know if Ozzy Osbourne will ever be at the 100% he thinks he can be. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Guns N' Roses is as good as they were when I saw them about 4 or 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. They are fantastic because they've cleaned up. They sound great. They look great. And they went 2.5 hours without a break. They didn't pause. I don't even know. I saw them in Nashville, and I'm not even sure they said, how you doing, Nashville? I don't even think they said that. I mean, they might have. After it. that would have been it. I mean, they started. When I tell you they started on time to the second, they weren't 3 minutes out. It started at like 9 p.m. And I mean 9 p.m., not 9:01.
That's great.
9.
I love it.
And they went straight 2.5. And it was, blow your eardrums out. And it was just awesome. And they were clean. The sound was clean and pure and just, so good.
That ain't the same Guns N' Roses I saw at the Birmingham Racecourse. Yeah, back in the 80s.
I'd love to see Iron Maiden. Yeah. I would love to see Iron Maiden.
Yeah. Well, you're going to see them both. Well, I'm not sure who UAB is playing that weekend, but just saying.
Let's talk about it.
I could get us a private plane. Maybe we can go out there for one night and go check it out. Ooh. Mark, thank you so much, brother. Next week, we'll be 1 week out from kickoff. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you.
Yeah, man. Can't wait. Talk to you soon.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.